She was face down on her own porch, hands zip-tied behind her back, her groceries crushed under a boot. "I live here," she said again, but no one listened. They shouted codes, called for backup, and scanned her ID like it was forged. It wasn't. Her name was on the deed. She bought the house cash. But in that moment, all they saw was a woman who didn't belong. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from. The mistake was in the system. But the system never apologized. At exactly 6:31 p.m., Raquel Carter pulled into her driveway in a quiet suburb just outside Birmingham, Alabama. She had worked 12 hours straight, skipped lunch, and carried 2 bags of groceries and her laptop in one hand. The other held her house key. The air was still. One neighbor trimmed hedges. Another walked a golden retriever. No sirens. No warnings. She stepped onto her porch, turned the key, and pushed the door open. That's when the voice came behind her. "Ma'am, drop everything. Hands where we can see them." She froze. The command didn't repeat. It didn't have to. The footsteps thundered up her lawn. Her groceries fell. Eggs cracked. Her laptop hit concrete. Before she could speak, a knee pressed into her back, pinning her to the porch. "She's resisting," someone said. She wasn't. Plastic zip ties dug into her wrists. A flashlight swept over her face. Another over her mail. "Code 631, the officer said into his radio. "Female suspect detained. Possible 459 in progress." Her cheek was against the wood. She didn't move. "Raquel Carter. I live here. I have ID. Please." "That's enough," said the second officer. "We'll sort it out at the station." The word "sort" always came after the damage. 3 patrol cars were now parked crooked across her front lawn. Lights still flashing. A neighbor filmed from a second-story window. Another peeked through curtains. No one came outside. She didn't shout. She didn't ask why. She'd worked for Homeland Security for 6 years. She'd written protocols on these encounters. She knew exactly what was happening and why. It took them 23 minutes to realize she wasn't a suspect. It took them 2 hours to admit she wasn't even in the system. And it would take her 9 days to get back what they'd taken. But tonight wasn't about recovery. Tonight was about remembering. Because the system didn't malfunction. It performed exactly as designed. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Raquel sat alone in the intake room, wrists bruised, palms raw from zip ties. Her socks were damp from the lawn, and her ID, Georgia state issued, valid, real, lay untouched on the desk in front of her. No one had asked her name. She'd been in the station for 47 minutes. A young officer peeked in through the door window twice. Never entered. The third time, she heard him whisper to someone outside. "That's her. The one from Windcrest Drive." But Raquel didn't live on Windcrest. She lived on Windrow. 3 streets apart. 3 letters off. 1 ruined life. The officer entered at last. Tall, nervous, mid-20s. "Ma'am, I just need to ask a few things." Raquel didn't speak. "We had a call. Woman breaking into a home on Windcrest. Matches your description." "Description?" she said, finally. Her voice was low, even. "Black female. Mid-30s. Hoodie. Grocery bags." "That's not a description. That's a category." He blinked. She pointed with her chin at her ID. "You've had my name and address for an hour. Did anyone check it?" He didn't answer. Just shifted his weight and looked at the ID for the first time. "Well, yeah, but what?" she said quietly. "Dispatch said suspect had a criminal record." Raquel laughed. Dry. Bitter. "And did they send a photo? Or just a color palette?" Silence. Outside the room, she heard voices. The words were muffled, but the tones were sharp. A woman, older, in charge, was asking questions now. Moments later, the door opened again. This one wore captain's bars. "Ms. Carter," she said with forced politeness, "I apologize for the confusion. You're free to go." Raquel didn't move. "My laptop is cracked. My groceries are ruined. My wrist is bleeding. And I've been zip-tied on my own porch for over an hour. I'm not looking for an apology. I'm looking for a record of what just happened." The captain shifted uncomfortably. "It won't go on your file. There's no arrest record. It was a field misunderstanding." "I don't mean my record," Raquel said coldly. "I mean yours." That was the moment the mask slipped. "Ma'am, if you're trying to escalate this." Raquel stood slowly. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from calculation. "You've already escalated it. I'm simply refusing to disappear." The room fell silent again. No one offered her a ride. No one asked if she needed help. They handed her a property receipt with the wrong address typed on it and opened the exit door. Outside, the night air felt different. Not cooler, just thinner. She walked home barefoot, carrying a cracked laptop, a bag of broken eggs, and silence that would have destroyed anyone who didn't know how to weaponize it. She arrived home just after midnight. Her porch light was still on, casting long shadows over the crushed groceries that no one had touched. Raquel stepped over broken eggshells, unlocked the door with the same key she'd held hours earlier, and entered the house she owned. Alone. No one had called to follow up. No one had left a voicemail. But someone had been there. She found the living room lamp on. She never left it on. Her bookshelf shifted, the rug folded at the corner, and her hallway closet door was ajar. She didn't panic. She documented 10 photos, each labeled, time-stamped. Then she checked her home server. The firewall log had 17 pings from an IP range linked to the county sheriff's network. Remote access probes. Nothing breached. But someone had tried. Raquel sat at her kitchen counter and opened her cracked laptop, connecting it to an isolated network drive. She didn't type for a long time. She just stared, not at the screen, at the memory. The look on the captain's face. Not fear. Not guilt. Calculation. This wasn't just about one arrest. Someone had run her. Not just through local databases, through federal channels. And something about her triggered flags. But why? She had no criminal record. No debts. No social media. Her entire identity was structured to blend in, to avoid attention. Unless she opened an encrypted folder labeled Carter versus Trident. Inside, one document. Redacted. Over 100 pages long. A whistleblower memo she'd written 9 months ago. Never submitted. Only drafted. It outlined a pattern of algorithmic profiling tied to a police contracting firm, Trident Data Systems, that fed live data into patrol units across the county. She'd traced the false positives, the broken matches, the quiet settlements. It was ugly, and she had buried it. Until now. Raquel shut the file. There was no evidence they knew she had it. But the timing wasn't random. Something had triggered the system. Something internal. She checked her email. One message. No subject. No sender. Just 2 words. Walk carefully. No attachments. No traceable headers. She closed the laptop and locked it inside a steel case beneath the floor. By 3 a.m., she was in bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow she wouldn't call a lawyer. She wouldn't post about what happened. She wouldn't even speak to the police. She would go back to work, as if nothing happened. Because the only thing more dangerous than speaking out too early was letting them know she had more to say. By Monday morning, the temperature in the office had changed. No one said anything directly, but silence has weight. And today, it dragged behind every smile, every forced hello, every glance that landed just a second too long. Raquel sat at her desk. Her badge still worked, barely. It took 3 tries to open the side entrance. Her system login failed once, then twice, before finally unlocking with a delay she'd never seen before. Her inbox had been emptied. No assignments, no updates, no security alerts, just a single email from Human Resources. Meeting request, 3:15 p.m., mandatory. She read it twice. Then she turned her attention to the internal network logs. Everything looked normal, at first. But buried 3 layers deep, she found a new background process tagged Internal Compliance Monitoring. It had been added Sunday at 4:42 a.m. No ticket. No approval. She clicked through the shell script. It was pinging local drive activity. Live. They were watching her machine. Raquel didn't flinch. She minimized the window, opened a second one on a ghost drive, and began a silent trace. One IP pinged back, Trident Systems. The same firm from her buried whistleblower draft. By lunch, her name wasn't on the cafeteria order list. No badge access to the server floor. Even her Slack profile had been marked inactive. At 2 p.m., her direct supervisor, Morgan, walked past her desk without a word. That was new. Morgan always stopped, always asked questions. But today, he walked as if she wasn't there. By 3:14 p.m., Raquel stood outside conference room 6B. She didn't knock. Inside, 2 men she didn't know. Both wore visitor badges. Both had folders in front of them. Neither stood up. The older one spoke first. "Miss Carter, please close the door behind you." She did. "We're conducting a standard audit," he said, flipping open a folder. There have been some inconsistencies flagged in your recent access logs, such as excessive activity outside of business hours, unusual traffic to isolated servers, and a flagged attempt to access legacy compliance records. Raquel blinked once, then smiled. I built those servers. All three. You're talking about architecture I designed. The younger man didn't react. He slid a paper across the table. We're placing you on temporary leave pending internal review. Effective when? Immediately. Is this disciplinary? It's procedural. His voice was flat. You're not under investigation. That was a lie. Raquel stood, nodded once, and left without speaking. Her badge deactivated 5 minutes later. By sunset, she was officially locked out of the system she helped create. Her code, her firewalls, her entire infrastructure now used to block her. And she still hadn't told anyone what really happened on Thursday night. Because they weren't trying to contain a breach. They were trying to bury the only person who saw one coming. By Tuesday morning, she was invisible, by design. No job, no official record of arrest, no open investigation. But everything about Raquel's world had changed. She sat in a rented co-working space downtown. No cameras, no logins, burner laptop, hotspot tethered through 2 layers of encryption. She didn't check email. She didn't call anyone. She just opened a shell terminal and began to trace. First, the monitoring script that had been planted on her machine at work. She recreated it from memory, line by line, then reversed it. The traffic logs exposed something deeper, a hidden crawler pulling queries not just from her device, but from others. Devices that belonged to staff who had nothing to do with her. Compliance staff, payroll, HR. They were looking for anything. The access trail led to a third-party domain registered out of Phoenix. But buried in the DNS history was a redirect, one she'd seen before. Tridency's-core.sec.monitor.com. It wasn't just Trident. It was their internal compliance mirror. The same database she'd hacked 2 years earlier during a system audit, the one she never documented because it was outside her contract. Back then, it was just a curiosity. Now it was the epicenter. She launched a probe, quiet, cautious. Just enough to see if the door was still cracked. It was. The backdoor she'd planted for emergency audit tracing still functioned. They never found it. Never patched it. Typical. Inside, she found a queue of flagged identities. Names cross-referenced with security alerts, camera footage, AI pattern recognition, and non-cooperative profile markers. Race, zip code, movement patterns, purchase history, language. Raquel wasn't the first name on the list, but she was the most recent. One entry stood out. Carter, R. Elevated risk, suppress trace, monitor passive. Suppress trace. That meant, do not arrest. Do not charge. Just observe. Discredit quietly. Because someone knew exactly who she was and feared what she might expose. She downloaded the entry, encrypted it twice, and uploaded it to a secure offshore archive. Then she did what she hadn't done in years. She sent a message. Only 3 words. It's active now. No name. No signature. Just coordinates. Then she wiped the laptop, burned the SIM card, and walked out into the street like any other commuter. They had watched her code. They had watched her house. Now they would watch their own system collapse and not know who lit the match. The first failure happened at 2:17 a.m. A core analytics node inside Trident Systems' regional server room rebooted without warning. No alerts. No logs. Just silence. The backup didn't activate. 5 minutes later, the redundancy chain froze. At 2:22 a.m., a senior compliance officer named Harold Russ called IT. The activity dashboard's dead. What's going on? The technician replied without hesitation. We've got power. No errors on our side. Could be a data pipeline issue. It wasn't. It was Raquel. From a rotating node, bouncing through virtual machines she'd spun up in Iceland, she'd injected a recursive data chain, a loop that fed the system its own misinformation, wrapped in valid metadata. Nothing broke. Nothing screened. But nothing worked. By morning, 2/3 of Trident's live threat assessment dashboard showed clean scores across every monitor department. No threats. No suspicious movements. Just a national grid of zero-risk targets. False calm. Meanwhile, Raquel was already 5 steps ahead. She had names now. In the suppressed trace file she downloaded, she found 312 entries. Mostly men. Mostly poor. Mostly erased. Flagged. Detained. Released. But never documented. No charges. No headlines. Just shadows. They called it preemptive identification. No judge. No warrant. Just algorithmic suspicion dressed up as public safety. And her arrest, if it could be called that, was part of it. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the signature on the authorization request. It wasn't Trident's legal team. It wasn't local law enforcement. It was a former federal contractor, one she had trained personally. A man named Elias Ward. He worked under her for 11 months. She taught him the language of access, the protocols of passive monitoring, and how to build invisible systems. Now he was using her code to blacklist people who looked like her. Raquel stared at the authorization form, her name watermarked faintly across the test module embedded inside the platform. She had written this script. She had refined it for federal use. And someone had redeployed it, without consent, into civilian law enforcement. She didn't cry. She archived the proof, created 5 redundant backups. Then she wrote a note in plain text. System architecture stolen. Misused. I can prove it. The targets are real. She didn't send it to the press. She sent it to Trident's internal compliance server, anonymously. Attached, 5 user access profiles with timestamps and manipulated metadata. She wanted them to know someone was inside, not to stop them, to make them panic. Raquel understood one thing better than anyone who had tried to erase her. Surveillance culture collapses when it no longer trusts its own eyes. Wednesday, 4:11 a.m. Her prepaid phone rang. It wasn't a number she recognized. She let it buzz 5 times, then silence. No voicemail. 7 minutes later, it rang again. Same number. This time, she answered. Silence. Then a male voice. Raquel? She didn't reply. The voice continued. Calm. Too calm. I think you know who this is. You've triggered 4 audits in the last 24 hours. That's not a coincidence. Still, she said nothing. Your code is inside our system, he added. Your signature is all over it. We can trace the structure. We know your methods. Raquel finally spoke. Then you know how deep I can go. Pause. Then he laughed. That's not what we're afraid of. She narrowed her eyes, silent. We're not calling to threaten you, he said. We're offering a solution. Quiet. Private. We shut down the platform. You walk away. No exposure. No retaliation. Raquel stood from the bench inside the empty metro station. You want me to delete the proof. We want to contain the damage. You want to bury what you did. Raquel, he said, softer now. This isn't personal. These programs prevent chaos. The public doesn't need panic. They need order. Then maybe they should stop building systems that define chaos by skin tone. Silence. Then, you're making this racial. It's not. Her voice sharpened. You build a platform that auto-targets based on biometric profile, zip code, gait analysis, and spending patterns. And in 2 years, you flagged over 11,000 people. 89% of them Black or Latino. You're telling me that's coincidence? Another pause. Then, I'm not debating ethics with you. You already lost that debate, she said. Then hung up. The phone vibrated again. Not a call, a message. This doesn't end how you think. Raquel crushed the SIM card under her boot, dropped the phone into a sewer grate, and walked into the rising dawn. She didn't need to think. She already knew how this ended. Not with her breaking their system, but with them breaking themselves, trying to find her in it. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was building a corridor they couldn't see. A silent hallway of evidence, signatures, stolen code, and statistical trauma. And at the end of that hallway, a locked door. One only she had the key to. And when she opened it, it wouldn't be for negotiation. It would be for exposure. Thursday, 9:42 a.m. It started in Camden County, New Jersey. Patrol units received a priority trace on a 14-year-old boy who allegedly matched a vandalism suspect flagged by the city's predictive risk AI. 2 units responded. The boy was walking to school. They detained him in front of his classmates. But when they entered the ID into the system, something went wrong. The tablet crashed. The risk scanner rebooted. And the screen returned a new name. Source compromised. Trace origin, Carter.Atlanta.Arch. They tried again. Same result. By 11 a.m., the same glitch repeated in 6 cities: Chicago, Oakland, Dallas, Charlotte, and Jacksonville. Each time, the system stalled. Each time, the same 2 words flashed. Carter. Arch. Within hours, the chatter started online. A clip from a body cam leaked, blurred, shaky, but real. An officer stammering into his mic. Systems looping a name Carter, What the hell is this? By evening, conspiracy blogs lit up. Who is Carter? Rogue agent behind predictive failures? Sabotage or inside leak? They didn't know it yet, but Raquel had embedded a broadcast node, one line of code that mirrored every flagged scan and replaced it with her metadata. Not to protect herself, to make them look. By 6 p.m., Trident's servers were in lockdown mode. Emergency maintenance windows. No access. Public dashboard offline. But the panic didn't stop. Inside the Atlanta field office, Raquel's face was printed and pinned to a wall of screens. Not as a suspect, as an anomaly. And somewhere deep inside a corporate bunker, a man in a gray suit slammed his fist against the table and barked. She turned the system into a mirror. Because now every officer, every analyst, every supervisor watching a flagged suspect saw her. Raquel Carter. No charges. No threat. No criminal history. Just a woman they tried to erase, now watching them back. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She walked into a hardware store, paid in cash, and picked up a burner router and a prepaid hotspot. At checkout, the clerk asked if she wanted a receipt. Raquel smiled. I want them to know I was here. Then she vanished again. Not underground. Not into darkness. Into the one place no surveillance could follow. Public exposure. Friday morning. The headlines dropped all at once. Atlanta woman behind predictive policing sabotage. Former contractor linked to system failure. Meet Raquel Carter. A history of digital extremism? They called her unstable. A former analyst with personal grievances. One outlet claimed she'd been fired years ago for misconduct, a file that didn't exist. Another hinted at foreign ties. Photos were pulled from her LinkedIn, cropped, darkened. One blog used a blurry screenshot of her from a college conference, doctored to look angry. Within hours, bots flooded her name. Tweets, videos, conspiracy boards, anonymous users calling her a hacker, a traitor, a threat. By noon, she couldn't search her own name without wading through lies. None of it surprised her. Raquel sat in the corner of a dim cafe, hood up, laptop glowing against her face. Across the street, an armored SUV idled, windows tinted black. They were close now. She'd counted 6 passes around the block. She didn't flinch. Instead, she typed in a command she had written months ago but never executed. A script titled, Echo Zero, Closure. It wasn't an attack. Not exactly. It was a release. Inside the script were records. Full internal memos from Trident's risk team. Logs of falsified metrics. Audio of Elias Ward approving ethnic likelihood filters. Visual maps of every neighborhood the system had overpoliced. And the suppressed arrest footage from her own porch. Everything. Clean. Verified. Irrefutable. She didn't post it on social media. That would be too easy to bury. She sent it directly, through secure relay, to 117 journalists. Then to 3 civil rights attorneys. And finally, to the families of the 312 names she'd found in the suppressed trace file. Each file carried her initials in the header. Not to take credit. To make sure no one else took the blame. At 3 p.m., the SUV disappeared. 2 hours later, the cafe lost power. Someone tried to jam the routers. But it was too late. The files were already replicating across thousands of servers, mirrored in real time, timestamped across continents. She closed the laptop. Stood. And for the first time since her arrest, she felt it. Not safety. Not peace. Control. They could lie. They could distort. They could spin. But the truth was out. And the system they built, one designed to operate in shadows, had just been pulled into light. She didn't sue. She didn't call a press conference. And she didn't speak to reporters, though she knew she could have, easily. With her credentials, her name, and what had happened on that porch, the world would have listened. But Dr. Elisa Gray didn't need noise. She needed permanence. The next morning, she returned to her home. Alone. The crushed eggs had dried into the welcome mat. The zip-tie marks were still faint on her wrists. She picked up the same bag of groceries they had stepped on, wiped dust off a can of soup, unlocked her door with the same key that had once been used to accuse her. Inside, the alarm system beeped twice. She entered her passcode. The screen flashed, "Welcome home." Later that week, she walked into the city's internal affairs division. No press. No lawyers. Just her. In a navy suit, with a thin black folder in her hand. "I'd like to speak with the Director of Procedural Oversight, please," she said calmly at the front desk. "And may I ask what this is regarding?" The officer asked. She met his eyes without hesitation. my unlawful detainment, on my own porch, and the corrective systems that failed to prevent it. In that folder wasn't a lawsuit. It was a report, 17 pages, with procedural gaps, recommendations, and state-level legal references. On the final page, her name, her title, and 3 letters underneath. PhD. When they finally sat her down with Deputy Director Monroe, he looked confused. And who exactly are you? She didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. I'm a resident, whose body, property, and rights were violated in full view. And I'm here so that it never happens again. To me, or to anyone else. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he nodded. And for the first time since the incident, someone wrote her words down. Not out of fear, but because silence was no longer an option. She exited through the side entrance. Declined media requests. Didn't post on social media. She simply drove home. Her neighborhood hadn't changed. The porch was still cracked. The lawn still brown from the weeks she'd avoided going outside. But she stepped onto it now with quiet purpose. Every evening, she watered the grass. The officers didn't come back, but their footprints remained. Each time she passed the faint gray mark where her face had been pressed into concrete, she didn't look away. She stared at it. Not with rage, not with grief, but with clarity. I'm still here, she thought, and I'm not going anywhere.